Today is Thursday, June 25th, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Antros. A devastating earthquake strikes and thousands are feared dead. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Glad you're with us, getting through the news of the day. We're here each and every weekday, bright and early, doing just that. With me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. On the Focus Story, Billy, for years, an undercover narcotics officer, also worked as a pastor. Dale Sutherland's story is powerful.
Yeah, it is. You know, Dale Sutherland working two different jobs, pastoring and dealing with narcotics and drugs in the streets. It's kind of a wild, wild story. We'll get into the details of that today.
All right, looking forward to that coming up in just a moment. Also on the main thing, we've got another horrific massacre of Christians in Nigeria. Raj has the details on that coming up on the main thing. All right, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Christian Solidarity International. And as you know, they're our longtime sponsor here on the podcast, and precisely for stories we just mentioned there that you're going to hear from Raj, where Christians are being targeted. Nigeria, definitely right now, the most deadly place and the most dangerous place in the world to be a Christian right now. And they are facing attacks like this on the regular. And that is why CSI is so needed. They're there on the ground working, and they have been for decades. And they're the group that is helping people not only out of these immediate situations, and they are providing clean water, housing, medical care, support for families who are trying to rebuild after attacks like these. But they're in all places around the world doing that. And so if you want to help and walk alongside those efforts, you read these stories, you hear of these stories of Christians being persecuted in violent ways and devastating ways, go to csi-usa.org/quickstart. You can help. You can make a difference and stand with your brothers in Christ. If you're feeling led and you're feeling called to do that, just go to csi-usa.org/quickstart. Venezuela's worst earthquake disaster in more than a century has left entire neighborhoods in ruins as rescuers are racing to find survivors. Two massive earthquakes measuring 7.2 and 7.5 struck just 39 seconds apart, triggering widespread destruction across northern Venezuela and prompting the U.S. Geological Survey to issue a rare red alert, warning of potentially catastrophic casualties. While officials have so far confirmed at least 32 deaths and more than 700 injuries, the USGS initially warned the final death toll could ultimately climb into the thousands, with some early estimates ranging as high as 100,000 if worst-case projections prove accurate. Buildings collapsed across Caracas, roads filled with rubble, and dramatic videos showed terrified residents fleeing homes, baseball fans rushing onto the field during a game, and parts of the main international airport ceiling crashing down as the quakes struck. President Trump said the U.S. is ready, willing, and able to help. That is the big story happening right now. You can read more on that over at cbnnews.com. Billy, this is a horrible situation. I don't have the details yet on if Operation Blessing is able to be on the ground there yet, but I'm sure they are mobilizing. This is the sort of thing they do around the globe, ob.org. Stay tuned for updates from there. But this is one of those situations that's just it's rare. I mean, you get the double earthquake happening right back to back, and the videos are terrifying. And let's just pray that this death toll isn't as bad as they're suspecting.
Yeah, I mean, just horrific and unimaginable and just tragic. And these are those events when they happen. We've got to dig into prayer. We got to look at what Operation Blessing and others are doing and support it, because this work is important. People are in desperate need. You imagine losing everything, your house being destroyed. It's just it's unimaginable.
Yeah, and with earthquakes, there's really not any warning. They just kind of strike without any sort of warning ahead of it time, and you just so nobody can really, you can't really prepare for it. It's just kind of like, we've all probably felt like one of those little earthquakes, and it's just like, is that an earthquake? And all of a sudden you could be anywhere. And so a very, very difficult situation. And especially when big one strikes like that back to back, and buildings are collapsing. There's just really not a lot you can do. And so, man, tough situation. We'll certainly be praying for it, and we'll keep you updated on efforts to help. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And as Billy mentioned there, for years, an undercover narcotics officer also worked as a pastor. Tell me about Dale Sutherland's story.
Yeah, this one is really interesting. He's known as the undercover pastor. He's preached for a long time, but he spent 29 years working as an undercover cop, buying drugs and helping those with fewer opportunities rebuild their lives through his ministry work as a pastor. Now, one of the most interesting things about his story centers on the tension that he faced, right? He's putting people behind bars while also desperately working to offer freedom, spiritual freedom, which I think is really interesting, right? You know, you're making people deal with the crimes that they've committed, but you're also trying to figure out how do you help them find Jesus. And so he talked with us about his journey into law enforcement, which really started in Bible college. He said he started with a security job, and he met some police there while he was in Bible college, and he started hearing them talk about their work. And he's like, well, I also wanted to work in an urban environment, and I thought this is where my ministry needed to be. And so he was so intrigued by their stories that he wondered what it would be like to try working in law enforcement for a few years. So he joined, assuming that he would learn more about the streets while honing his ministry skills. And he thought he'd get this extra biblical education, and he wouldn't just learn the Bible. He'd learn again, what is it like to deal with people who are living in the streets. And ultimately he ended up staying for 29 years as a cop. So it wasn't just a couple of years. He ended up staying as a career, and really, really just an interesting, as he again was doing his ministry.
How does he use the opportunity to share the gospel?
Yeah. So this is also really interesting because along the way, he found himself sharing the gospel, not only with fellow police officers, but also with the people he had arrested. And so for the last 12 years of his police career, he was a youth pastor in his church. So he's sort of like living out this dual role for more than a decade there. He said he would often see men who were incarcerated find Jesus behind bars. And one of the things he talked about was how there isn't really a lot of street ministry reaching these people before they go to jail. So there's not a lot of people out there necessarily doing work. And so it's really after the arrest and after they go to jail or prison that a lot of this happens. And he also said, that when you're behind bars, that's where the chaplains are. And, he's talked to a lot of those guys who have gone to prison, and that's where, again, they find Jesus because there's chaplains and resources. But he talked about a number of really interesting cases of people he had brought to Christ. And so one of them was a former cartel member who was in his office one day, and that was near the end of his career. He said he prayed the prayer, committed his life to the Lord, and wanted to get out of the business. And so he said he's had that experience a lot. He's had a lot of experiences where people haven't accepted the Lord, but there was another one. There was a guy who went to federal prison for 5 years and then got out and became a pastor. And now he and Dale, they do ministry together, which is pretty cool. So, you just don't know what's going to happen with all of these cases, but he's had a really interesting career. Again, thought he was going to go just into ministry, but his ministry ended up being a police officer.
Yeah, that's very cool. And so what is that organization, his organization, Boost Others? What do they do?
Yes, this is interesting. He's got Boost Others, and they work with social workers, cops, firemen, and teachers to help families in crisis. So they basically do all the things that those individuals don't do, that the government doesn't do, right? They fill in service gaps. And so an example would be a terminally ill child going through cancer treatment. The family didn't have the funds needed for medical care, and so they couldn't get their child's IG tube and the things this child needed, and so the organization provided $200 needed to get formula and some of the bags that they needed, and they stayed with that family until the child became cancer free. Another example was this sexual abuse survivor who wanted to become an attorney and had worked really hard to get over her trauma. She got into a good school, but she didn't have any resources. They helped her get a computer. So Boost Others, really does boost others. They kind of step in and figure out what do they need to do to help those in need. And so it's a cool organization. And again, filling in those gaps, there are a lot of gap areas. And so Dale and his organization, they do a great job of dealing with that.
Yeah, I love this story. I love just seeing how people use the situations that they're in and then just take that and then turn it for something for the ministry and for drawing people to Christ. And I think that should be a good lesson for all of us to kind of look at where we're at. What job do we have? It doesn't necessarily have to be a job directly related to a Christian ministry, but you can certainly turn it into that, or you can use something related to that in order to build on that and to focus on making that a priority in whatever walk of life you're in. So, I mean, I think this is really cool that he's doing that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And this is the sort of hands-on, help that we're called to do as Christians.
Yeah, it really is. And certainly we'll be praying for his efforts going forward, and definitely appreciate you bringing it to the podcast today. All right, we are going to go to the main thing now, and we've got another brutal attack targeting Christians in Nigeria. The latest is renewing urgent concerns over the escalating violence against believers there. CBN's Raj Nair is joined by Building Zion founder Alex Barbir with the breaking details. That's today's main thing.
We have yet another horrific massacre of Christians to report on from Nigeria. Well, the founder of Building Zion, Alex Barbir, joins us now. My friend, what can you tell us?
Every single day, Nigerians are being killed. And since the Palm Sunday massacre happened 2.5 months ago, there have been almost 50 attacks. And just now in Mushere, Bokos, they've killed at least 20 Christians. 20 were buried 2 days ago. And there's still victims in the hospital that are still dying from those wounds. And so you had Fulani terrorists who came into this village in the middle of the night. They went even into a hospital. They killed a doctor. They killed patients that were in that hospital. They shot people with AKs and machine guns. They macheted people. And this is the story for a lot of Nigerians. And this is what people, not only in Nigeria, but even in America, are trying to hide. Nigeria paid $9 million to a lobbying group called DCI to tell the government that Nigeria is protecting Christians. Is this protecting Christians? As 20 more were just massacred. And they've been trying to enter that village for days. The security forces know that these people are trying to enter the village. They know they're coming to attack. They know the threat is there. Yet they're not going and preventing and actually protecting, as this DCI lobbying group is so-called saying to the US government. They're continuing to be killed every single day.
Well, Alex, you sent me a photo of another massacre, and we can't show it. I want to try to describe it because it's important. I wish we could show it so that people could see it, but clearly we can't show it for YouTube reasons and other things. But it's a kid, and as a father of 3 kids, it's a kid who's I'm looking at it right now. I almost can't look at it. It's his neck and face through his lips have just been ripped open. And there's just, I can't, gosh. It's one of those things where clearly this is happening, but there are entities that clearly want to say that it's not happening. So first off, what is that image that we can't show? What is that? It's kids. What is that image? But then why are there so many people so ardently saying that this isn't happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's a child. And in that attack, this was in Kaduna, literally a couple days before this attack happened. I think it was 8 or 9 people were killed in that attack in Kaduna. And that was a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old that were included to be victims. And this picture is a 5-year-old who pretty much had his face cut in half. And this is what is happening to people, innocent people. They've done nothing wrong, yet there's nobody who is standing for them. The government is not protecting them, and they're paying other people to lie to the government to say that they are protecting them. So clearly there's a greater agenda that is happening, which is why the government is paying, which is why people in Nigeria are hiding the truth, yet it's Christians who are crying out and crying out and crying out, asking Trump, where are you? Can you please help us? America, can you help us? Who can help us? Because we have no voice. We're silenced. We have no power. We don't have guns. How can we protect ourselves with rocks and sticks when people have machine guns and AKs and nobody's protecting them? And these attacks are happening all the time. I mean, literally, I kid you not, since the Palm Sunday massacre, hundreds have been killed just in Plateau State alone over the past 2.5 months. And this is like 40 attacks.
This isn't something that through the grapevine. Very often I'll be like, "Hey, where are you at, man?" And you'll be like, "In Nigeria," and you'll be, we'll be FaceTiming in Nigeria. You'll be at these funerals. This isn't something that hearsay for you. You've dedicated your life to this. But I'm trying to figure out the psychology. Why is there such a push to say that this isn't happening, right? Like there's a drumbeat. There is no genocide. There is no genocide. There is no genocide. And then folks like you and a myriad of other people in Nigeria, I'll just get text messages on WhatsApp of images of just slaughterhouses, massacres, just macheted kids. And it's like, where is the disconnect? Why is there such a emphasis from some people to deny that this is happening?
Because you have a greater Islamic agenda in Nigeria. That is the simple truth. And if it wasn't the case, then Nigerian officials would end this. The Muslims in Nigeria would be fighting this same fight. They would be the ones that are in the street protesting. They would be the ones taking up arms to go and protect the Christians. If there's such a peaceful religion, if they're against terrorism, they're against killing, where are the Muslims and what role are they playing when Christians are being killed? And even fellow Muslims in northwestern and northeastern states are being killed. Where is the Sokoto Caliphate? Where is the Sultan? The Sultan, the leader of all of Muslims in Nigeria, what has he done in terms of terrorism? What have all the Islamic clerics and the teachers and the sheiks done? I can tell you what they've done. They've allowed Christians to be killed because of blasphemy. They've allowed pastors to have bounties on their head because of blasphemy. Deborah, a school student in university, she was accused of blasphemy because she asked in a school group chat why we were talking about Islam when we were talking about exams. Because of that question, Muslims stoned her. They put tires around her body and burned her alive on video. I'll ask you the question, is there justice for Deborah today? No. Is there justice when people put bounties on the heads of pastors and they go and kill Christians because of so-called blasphemy, because of blaspheming Muhammad and the Quran? No. There's no justice for that. And in fact, many Muslims agree with this. It's part of Sharia law. And this is what they want to instill across Nigeria to make Nigeria an Islamic state. This is why they're against Christian presidents. Peter Obi, the Muslims don't want him. Why? He's too Christian. Because Christians stand for freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of action. And in Islam, you don't have that. And if there's true freedom, it stands against Islam.
Okay, obviously, we've had you on before. We're going to have to have you on again. But imagine, let's just, for the sake of platform, that you were in, I don't know, The Hague or the United Nations, and someone got up and spoke before you and said, "Hey, everyone, calm down. This is simply herder clashes with people debating over farmland. This is simply a migratory thing happening. Hey, the world it's not that big of a deal." And you were to get up next. So final question, I'll give you this platform. What would your message be to the world?
There's one clear answer to answer that question. And it's very simple, and it cannot be proved in any other direction. Yelwada in Benue, where they killed almost 300 Christians. This town was already an area that was harboring IDPs, internally displaced people, from other attacks that were more interior in the rural areas. They fled those areas because of killing and massacres and burning to come to this town. This town is on the main road. It goes directly to the capital. It's a border town between Benue and Nasarawa states. Okay? If this is simply about grass, the herders need more grass for their cattle. Why are they coming to the very, very, very village and town that is on a main road? They have the entire interior land they've already taken over from other Christians by violence. There's plenty of grass in those places. The grass is no different. And the bigger question that we have to ask if they are competing for land and for grass for their cattle. This means that other Fulani cows that are eating the same grass are competition. It's the same thing as Burger King, Wendy's, and McDonald's. They're all competing with each other. And that means that the Fulani should also be taking out other Fulani. They should be killing and attacking anybody who is competition for their cattle. But they're not doing that. Which Muslims and which Fulani are they going and killing in the name of global warming and migration? They're not. They're directly targeting and killing Christians across Plateau, Kaduna, Taraba, Benue states. They're not killing other Fulani. They're not going and killing Hausa. They're killing Christians. And that's a fact that cannot be argued. How many Christians were killed in this attack? How many Christians were killed in the Palm Sunday massacre? I was 2 miles away from where that attack took place. And I went there within 30 minutes of the attack taking place because my partner lived in that exact intersection it took place at. And when I went there, the road was filled with blood. You had bodies that were piled up all around with Christians that were crying out directly to God. They weren't Muslim. They were Christian. And those are the people that I've set my heart and my life and my initiative to go in to help. We're rebuilding their villages. We're building 25-foot security watchtowers around the villages so local forces can help secure those villages, warn their families if there's an impending attack. We're drilling water. We're doing everything we can to help those persecuted Christians in a tangible way that other organizations and churches and people are refusing to do. We're doing it from the ground.
Alex, I can feel your frustration. I thank you again for coming on here and speaking the truth, my friend. Thank you again, and God bless.
God bless you, brother.
All right, Raj, appreciate that update there. Definitely continue to keep people, the Christians that are targeted there in Nigeria, in our prayers. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We got Psalm 71:14. As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more. No matter what's going on, that's what we're called to do. It can be difficult. Life can be challenging, but we're called to have hope in him no matter what.
Yeah, amen to that. And it's difficult at times when you're in a tough season of life, but it's something that we need to be doing, and God knows it's for our good. So definitely be praying for you as you go forward in your week doing just that. Get yourself on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. God bless. We'll see you back here tomorrow.